A viewer of the show sent me a link to this Reverb Instagram post. It was labeled the 10 most watched items on their site in the year 2024. And as I'm scrolling through here, hey, doesn't that look familiar? Welcome back, Troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. This guitar is the Mystic Maiden. It's a 1957 Gibson Les Paul Special that somebody did some very interesting things to. I have a complete full documentation of this guitar on my YouTube channel if you want to learn all the nitty-gritty details, but I thought it would be fun to highlight a guitar that I found that is very similar to the Mystic Maiden, maybe not quite as cool, but it gave off similar energy, as well as look at some of the other most watched guitars on Reverb together. So strap in, things are about to get fun. So let's start with the similar one. You gotta remember, at one point in time, these juniors and specials were just cheap student grade level guitars, not the vintage iconic pieces that we know and love of today. It took time for them to be appreciated in that way. But look what somebody did to this one. It gives me Bob Marley vibes like crazy. Which, if you're not familiar, his looked like this, but he had a bunch of other modified guitars that had other energies to them. You could also say it's a little bit of the Grateful Dead that we're talking about today with some of their interesting guitars. This appears to have originally been a Les Paul Special, judging by the binding along the fretboard. So that means we would have had a toggle switch in this area that has been modified into a rotary knob. But we can see we've got a P90 in the neck position like normal. We've got one added in the center, and then we've got a mini humbucker. So best case scenario, those are still the original P90 pickups. And then somebody in the 70s just slapped one of those mini hummers in there. But what's kind of interesting about this pickup modification is the fact that you can tell it was rather crudely done. It's either that or it was intentionally not placed directly in the center. You've got just a little bit of extra room right here. Because to be perfectly centered, this needs to come down just a little bit. But they might have did that to help them with their picking. Because that's one of the most common things people complain about a 3-pickup guitar on. You can't pick as well as on a 2, because there's so much room right here. Whereas when you throw a bunch of humbuckers and P90s in here, that's when you're like, oh yeah, all right, it's a little bit different, you gotta adjust. Now, triple P90s, maybe not as cumbersome as humbuckers, but still, you have to get used to it. So 3 pickups, mystery knob. Our next photo actually answers the question. It does appear to be a regular rotary. It has approximately 6 choices. So position 1, neck and bridge. 2 is neck and middle. 3 is all of them. And then 4, 5, and 6 is just the independent pickup itself. Not gonna lie, I like that. That's every single combination. Except for oddly leaving out middle and bridge, which is what you usually get on a 3-pickup Les Paul. Now, it's not quite as easy to understand as our control layout. It looks like in order to not route out the back of the guitar anymore, they just decided to throw 2 more pots in between the existing ones. So talk about crowded, but it probably gets the job done. I would imagine this is still the bridge pickup controls, this is the neck pickup controls, and then your middle is in the middle of those. Say what you want about that modification, at least they didn't route out the back. Because if somebody wanted to restore this, it's a lot easier to plug 2 holes than it is to plug up a route. But after that, we need to focus on the bridge that has been upgraded to a Leo Kwan style. You could always swap back into a regular one if you wanted to, but this one has individual adjustment for each of the strings. And wow, the placement on those saddles to center on the neck, a little bit crazy. But speaking of extreme, we've got some art on this. Now, whether or not you like the art, that's another question. Here's what I see. We've got some sort of a cool little dragon dude around our controls. And then you have like a planet, some sort of a sphere, and then you have like a majestic seashell where there's not a mermaid present, but a woman with long flowing golden blonde hair. But it's a very natural style of art. It's not overly sensationalizing anything. But then you've got something going on in the back. It's like a sun. It almost looks like a folded up lady being shot into space. I'm sure that's not what they were intending. It might just be like a branch of some sort. But it's shining the light down. It's hippie folk art. But unlike the Mystic Maiden, you could easily refinish this, hide all the sins, and restore it back to stock if you wanted to. But that would be a shame, I think. Pieces like this, you just have to enjoy for what they are. But now let's check out our headstock. They've removed the finish. It looks like it's down to just the bare mahogany. But you still have the Gibson logo there, so that was nice. This is what kind of gives me the Bob Marley vibes. You just have to add the thick binding around it. That looks like a reproduction truss rod cover. Outside of that, you definitely have some Grovers on here. But this is the big killer. Somebody erase the serial number. That's what I really like about the Mystic Maiden, is it was done by somebody who was smart enough not to get rid of that. They just masked off the original TV yellow finish and let it be. Very smart thing to do if you're ever reworking a guitar. Because if you don't, that opens up the possibility that this guitar was stolen and all these other things were done to hide its identity even further. Now, it could have been innocent. It could have just been some guy doing the artwork, and it was before serial numbers were a thing people even cared about. There's no way to know. But as far as the back, you just got your regular routes. I'm not sure if that's the original backplate that was just painted or what is even going on there. It almost looks like a Roman gladiator. He's got like a mace or something on here. He's riding his horse. And you're like looking on the inside/outside of the stadium. You certainly have a lot of wear down through to the bare mahogany towards the center of that body. But when you read their title, 1950s Gibson Les Paul Special, extensively modified natural reefing with added decals, #NSN. Once you've looked at all the photos, you realize, oh, that stands for no serial number. And then I was curious about this place. Is that a filled-in hole? Because that's kind of what it looked like, but sometimes paint is raised. But according to them, that is a filled-in hole. So I wonder if you open up the back plates, is there like a channel route done to there? Because you gotta remember, originally this had some sort of a pick guard. So a la Frank Zappa with this really interesting Roxy SG, they would have added some sort of other control underneath that guard, either a switch to do something with the pickups, or judging by the size of it, it was probably another pot. But the asking price, a little under $5,000, and appears to have sold. But now back to the Reverb list. The number one watch thing of all time this year was the EMI TG12345 Abbey Road console at a staggering 3,500 watchers. They're asking $2.5 million, but it recorded artists like the Beatles, Cliff Richard, George Harrison, and apparently is the only prototype console out of all of these 17 TGs. It's just one of those things where, like, if a piece could talk, I think that's why people were so interested in this. But the number two item was at 907 watchers. Is that crazy 73 meme Les Paul custom? Now, guys, I was really hoping and praying eventually the price would come down to the point that I would want to buy this, which in my head was $3,000. I was willing to pay that, and I was just going to keep this forever for the museum. I had tried to buy this before it made it to Reverb, and I think I had offered them $5,000 at that time just to have the rights to be the guy who says, yeah, I found it. And then I would have posted the story of how they got it. But at that time, they were not willing to go down that much. They wanted $7,500. Now, I think it did ended up getting marked down to like $5,600. Somebody did eventually pick this thing up. It's a lot of fun. We've done a separate episode on this, but it's a 73 Les Paul custom. They modified it for every single pickup combination. P90, single coil, you got your mini humbuckers, and a straight up humbucker. As you could plug this into 2 amps at the same time, kind of like a stereo guitar, but they could have multiple takes with different pickups, and then they could choose. It was a recording piece. To the average user, this thing was destroyed, but since this was shared around in the early internet days, it became one of those meme guitars, kind of like the headless SG. Maybe one day it'll still find its way to me. I'm sad it's gone, but at the same time, it sat for like, what was it, a year and a half? I don't regret not overpaying for it, but I'm glad we at least got some photos of its interior. The Mystic Maiden actually came in at number 3. It's got 500 watchers. It's one of those ones. Do I have it priced high? Yeah, I won't lie, but it's one of those things I could care less if it sells. I'm happy keeping it. And I paid a lot for it. But feel free to check out the full review and demo to learn more. Number 4, the Distorter Caster. I have been tempted to pick this up for review and documentation. I know it's been done. This thing first gained popularity in my eyes, like as far as the internet goes, because of Scott Grove. I think he had a video on one. It boggles my mind, and that's why I want to document one. But it's one of those guitars where I would probably have to keep it, so I have to wait until I find one at a price that I want to pay. But like this body twists up here, and it's an optical illusion. The neck actually just gets wider up here, and you can't fret the low E string, but everything else is the same, outside of the dots just being placed weird to make it look crazy. I imagine this would be a very fun video. I'm just not exactly sure if that's the color I'm after on one or not. But mark my words, one day we will review this guitar. But number 5 seemingly has gained more watchers over time, because it's now labeled at 616. This is the Daiki Tsuneta Signature Swinger. This was a Fender Japan limited edition exclusive guitar, and if I remember correctly, they sold out incredibly fast. This one appears to have been further modified. It's based on the Fender Arrow / Swinger guitar, and it came out around the same time that Fender Japan did the reissuing of them. And hey, you're in luck. I do have a video of it on my channel. I bought one brand new, and I agree, it is a really cool guitar because the Swinger in and of itself is kind of one of those weird guitars. So to have an artist say, hey, that's going to be my new signature and put P90s in it and make it way cooler, it makes sense. Number 6, I was kind of confused by. Watchers 407, listed 9 months ago. It's a 2008 Les Paul Standard in Honeyburst. So is it because it has a phenomenal top? I mean, it's nice. It's a very light, natural burst. It is gorgeous in that aspect. However, I wouldn't necessarily say it's crazy by any means. The way the light's reflecting off of it makes the binding look kind of interesting, but it's been modified with a double white Seymour Duncan in the bridge. The backside just has a light stain to it. Looks like you've got your PCB system still in place. It's got scratches, nicks and dings, strap locks put on it. Neutrik jack, that's just part of the era. And our headstock, it looks like somebody upgraded our tuners. And then it actually does have a crack repair here. Maybe that's why people are watching it. It's a pretty nice looking repair, all things considered. Yeah, maybe not so much from this angle, but at least they're honest about it. So with a break and a new nut and all this other stuff, maybe they watched it because it's cheap. You can buy a non-repaired one for $2,000, so I don't understand that one. It almost seems like some listing manipulation, like they're creating fake accounts to get an obnoxious amount of watchers to pressure someone into buying. But no one would do that, right? Number 7, Reverb made the comment of someone got for a steal. At a staggering 453 watchers, it's a 2012 USA SG P90. So Batwing Guard P90s, yeah, that's about what these typically go for, these older ones. They would list for like $1,200, but nowadays SGs are a lot more expensive. But this just seems kind of like a regular deal to me. It's got some nicks and dings, 2011, no crazy wood grain. Quick look at Reverb right now. There's one of the HPs for 14. Another similar one here from 2016. Here's a solid one for 14. But our next one is 484 watchers. It's just a regular 59 2020 reissue in Ice T-Burst VOS. But this one, okay, listing one of these for under $4,000, I can understand. But what confuses me now is when you have a good deal like that, it usually sells and then nobody sees the listing. So how did it get that many watchers? Maybe it was a gradual price reduction. I mean, as far as these R9s go, is this a nice top? Yes. But I wouldn't call it a monster top that people pine over. It's just one of those really nice tops that most people would be more than okay with. It's got that really heavily aniline-dyed cherry back and is from that return of Gibson first couple of years. It just had a couple of dings, typical binding bleed. Okay, I take that back. That's really heavy binding bleed on that side, but eventually that will fade out too. Wow. Yeah, all right. That is one of the worst binding bleeds I've seen in a while. But some guys actually like that. But whoa, okay, somebody played that like crazy. That's an impressive amount of fret wear. That was not a Case Queen since 2020. Looks like maybe even upgraded pickups. But then we can change things up. A lawsuit era 1977 orange by Fernandez. This thing, relatively speaking, was cheap. $565, a lot less than what we've seen previously. But I think the reason why this one got 503 watchers, probably because it was shared around. People were like, orange? They make guitars? The amplifier company? I'm not sure if that's the same company or not, but Orange does make guitars. We talked about it in this episode if you want to learn. But what's really crazy about that headstock is it looks fairly authentic to a 70s Fender. It's got the bullet truss rod, double string trees. But look at that, produced by Electric Sound Research Group. Almost infringing upon future ESP. But hey, goofy headstock aside, this is actually a really nice looking black Stratocaster, kind of David Gilmour vibes here. Probably nothing too crazy or special, but they match the vibe of that neck. Somebody had to have enjoyed playing this thing. And that bolt-on neck looks a little suspicious, like Well, why is it so long back here? And somebody swapped the tuners out and looks like has redone all the wiring and electronics, so maybe those aren't so bad after all. This is the reason why I want to start the 800 or less series, because we can document fun stuff like that. Once the relish sells, we're doing that. But the last one, clocking in at 506 watchers, is a $695 1979 Ibanez made in Japan studio export. This one's still available for $700. Kind of reminds me of like the PRS Vela S2, but you gotta remember this is way before those things. Ibanez always has those interesting tailpieces, kind of the harmonica style. You've got that interesting jungle cat vibe going on. Looking at your pick guard, the zebra bobbin pickups. Looks like it says Tom K up there. Okay. Now, whether or not it plays and sounds fantastic, you can't judge these guitars just based on photos, unfortunately. The frets do look nice and tall. The headstock's got those clipped wings, reminds me of the Epiphone look. That's why it's cheaper. You had a little bit of fretboard lifting, maybe, or at least some finish damage. Ooh, yeah, and it's got a break that was repaired by the neck. Now, if you'd like to learn more, feel free to go to Reverb's website. There's your link. We just looked at this one where it talked about guitars for the most part, but they also had other categories like the electronic gear, if you want to look at Moog boards and David Bowie stuff, as well as pedals. Surprise, surprise, the Klon makes the list. And they also had B-stock and used mint gear. I'm not surprised the Guild Surfliner made that, because at the blowout $200 pricing, that was a no-brainer. Even I picked one of those up to review. All right, troglodytes, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll catch you tomorrow on the next one. Take care.